It is time to begin a big rebuild on MLB The Show 25. Welcome to the Miami Marlins franchise, everybody. We are launching a big project today, and the Marlins are the perfect team for what I was looking for in franchise this year. They are, of course, one of the worst teams in baseball. They operate in 2025 with the lowest payroll. They have the lowest team budget here in the show. They are apparently the youngest team in baseball, but still lack direction for the franchise's future. I am very excited to have them as my team this year, as I was looking for a franchise where I could focus on the drafting and developing of a franchise's future. And the Marlins don't leave us a lot of choices. They're not a team that spends a lot of money. So we're not going to be able to sign superstars away from other teams. There are also some massive holes in this team's farm system. They are an organization that does a really good job of drafting and developing pitching, but they don't have a lot of offense. Before we start to break this team down and talk about my plans for this franchise, thank you to PlayStation for sending me an early copy of the game along with the MLB The Show launch box. I really appreciate it. This is now my third year in a row of starting up big franchises on MLB The Show on this channel. And last year I chose the St. Louis Cardinals, who weren't the biggest rebuild candidate. I knew this year I wanted a greater challenge. I wanted a team that needed so much work. And that's exactly what we're getting with these Miami Marlins. This is a very low-rated, young franchise that needs a lot before they're going to be competitive in the NL East or competing again for the NL pennant. Last season, the Marlins went 62-100, just a year after being a wild card team in 2023. But they have been deconstructing the core that got them to the postseason, and they already look like a completely different team, with a lineup full of players that I have very little familiarity with, outside of getting to know this team a little bit better these last few days as I prepare for the franchise. And there are some players here that I'm excited about for this team's future. Here in this first episode, I wanted to talk about the roster, break things down, and set everything up for us to begin Season 1 and going through our first year. In this series, I plan to take the Marlins from where they are today as a team expected to be one of the worst in Major League Baseball and turn them into a championship contender. And if you would like to be a part of this journey, subscribe to the channel. And if you wouldn't mind, it would help out the series and the channel a lot if you also left a like. And I love your feedback down below as well. I love going through the comment sections on my series and seeing what everybody has to say. A lot of times you guys help shape decisions I make and help me see things that I miss. So I really appreciate all the feedback that comes through in these series. And I am just excited to have a big project underway again on the game. I know last year at the Cardinals franchise, it wasn't as exciting of a series. I still really enjoyed it, but it wasn't a huge rebuild, and I knew I wanted to get back to that. So where do we begin then with the Miami Marlins? This is a team that features only one player above an 80 overall. It is also an extremely young team, as I mentioned, so there are only a handful of players that are over 30 years old. They have the lowest payroll in baseball and the lowest budget here in game, and their greatest salary goes to Sandy Alcantara, their ace pitcher, who is making $9.6 million this year and is one of their biggest trade candidates. Now, Sandy is an excellent pitcher who was a Cy Young winner back in 2022. I am expecting at some point we could see Sandy be traded. However, there's a 3-year clock. And I think there's a better chance of getting a good return if we are able to rebuild his game a little bit before making a move. He did not pitch in 2024 due to Tommy John surgery. He should be returning in 2025. But the last time he pitched was following his Cy Young season where he did noticeably regress. And that is why he is a 78th overall. Will he be the same pitcher now, post Tommy John surgery? We will find out. And if he ends up being somebody that we trade to fuel this rebuild or not. The top player on the team, though, is 21-year-old pitcher Eury Perez, who has that sky-high ceiling that could help change the fate of this organization. But Perez is also coming off his own Tommy John surgery right around a year ago. From what I'm reading, he is expected to come back around July. Now, when I loaded up this franchise file, I chose to load with injuries. That is an option when you're starting up a new franchise. And these are the injuries they have already in place for Miami. Eury Perez recovering from elbow surgery. This looks like he could be out longer than his real life timetable. I am able to edit injuries here in franchise. I can show you how to do that. It is a setting that can kind of be tricky to get to. But if you go to the General tab here under the settings and then go to Injury, you're probably thinking this is an on or off slider, but there is a third option in there called Manual, where you can then create injuries if there's something that the game is missing and you want in there. So say with Garrett Cole and the Yankees, he's unfortunately having Tommy John surgery. The game doesn't have that injury in here yet, but we are able to create it essentially. So I think the best way to get this franchise underway is to start in spring training, create all those injuries that I think are necessary, and give teams the chance to set their 26-man rosters based on that, and then get into the regular season. I don't plan on playing any of these spring training games. I plan on turning injuries off as I simulate through these games and get to the regular season. But that's how I want to start things up, is get those injuries in place for our starting point. If there's anything specific you want to make sure I don't miss within the Marlins organization, you can let me know. But I will be looking through for various injuries to get them in our franchise. So if there's anything the Marlins have done well in the last handful of years, it is draft and develop very good starting pitching. And that is where this organization is the strongest. If we project out into the future, there are players with high ceilings that we should see contribute in the franchise. Edward Cabrera is a 75 overall at 26 years old with only 2 years of Major League experience, which makes him a grizzled veteran by Miami Marlins standards. This is an extremely young roster. Cabrera is another player whose numbers have noticeably declined recently. The best thing Miami has going for it is its pitching, but the news hasn't been very good there in a long time, with injuries to Perez, Alcantara, even Braxton Garrett is injured. So I looked up the lineup that Miami had in their last postseason game. It wasn't even 2 years ago, right? There's only one starter from that game that is even on the team still, and that is outfielder Jesus Sanchez. That's how much things have changed. There really isn't a veteran presence in this offense. They have hit the proverbial reset button in Miami, and they're starting from scratch with the lowest budget and the youngest roster. But there are some players I am very excited to use in this series. I am familiar with Xavier Edwards' game because back in my Rockies franchise a few years ago, I acquired him. And here we've seen him develop into a really good contact hitter. They traded away Luis Arraez, but Edwards kind of fills that hole in the lineup with a similar skill set. Very high batting average, really high on base, nearing 400 last year. However, there are holes in his game. Not much power, which is a trend for the Miami Marlins, as they were 27th in home runs hit last year. But Edwards also struggles with the glove, and when I saw these ratings, I wanted to better understand why. So I checked out Baseball Savant, and his defensive metrics are really bad. I also checked out his outs above average grade from last year, which was second lowest at shortstop, only ahead of C.J. Abrams. Shortstop is one of those spots where you just cannot deal with bad defense, so I could see Edwards moving over to second in this series. With that being said, the early stages of this series are going to be about establishing our future, seeing who's a part of it, and developing these players. So I might have him play some shortstop, just because we know we're going to lose 90 plus games anyway. Let's see how much better he can get. Or if there's somebody better that can play short, then we'll move him to second base. But we aren't going to be doing a whole lot of winning early on. As a matter of fact, the biggest win this team had in the last year, I'd say, was their trade of Trevor Rogers to the Baltimore Orioles. They were able to scoop up a couple really good prospects in that move, including Connor Norby, who is one of the only serious sources of power in this entire lineup. The Minnesota native can play third, second, and the corner outfield spots with 75 power against righties and 71 against lefties. I sure hope he can become a star in this series. He needs to work on his plate vision so we can have him be more consistent, and like Edwards, his defense isn't up to par at a key defensive position. I'm expecting us to be committing a lot of errors and have difficulties with that side of the ball. I talked about Jesus Sanchez as the only player who started in their last wildcard game that is still on the team. Sanchez is 27 years old and does not hit lefties very well as a lefty himself, but he does have good contact and power ratings overall, and he is one of the best players on this team. With 2+ years of Major League experience, 446 games played. We'll see if he can help mentor the rest of this team as we try to put the pieces together. Overall, though, I do think Sanchez is a potential trade candidate, and we'll see what ends up happening with him. At the 4th spot, we have Jonah Bride, who is listed at first base, but can play majority of the infield spots. He's a righty that hits righties really well, but needs to work on hitting lefties. He has just over a year of Major League experience. Matt Mervis, 59 overall, might be on this 26-man roster, might be starting games. I just am not used to seeing an offense this low rated. Usually teams have a couple more veterans that you could think about trading, some like a little bit above replacement level starters. I am excited about Griffin Conine, and I think in this series we have to be a little more excited about these C-potential mid-70s rated players, because that is a starting caliber player when it comes to the Marlins. Good contact, solid power as well, and guess what? He can play a little defense, which is very refreshing. I do see our lineup here is missing somebody actually pretty important. That is Otto Lopez. So he kind of broke out in a way from Miami last year, hitting .270, playing really good defense. He all of a sudden looks like one of the better up-and-coming players on the entire team. Good contact skills, excellent fielder, so I think we could even look at him being a shortstop, as his skills just might have more value there than at second base. But Lopez, I think, has the type of skill set we're going to look for in Miami. When you think about the challenges of constructing a team on a very low budget, I think about having to do a lot of the little things right. High on base, good defense, solid speed that can steal bases. I think that with the situation Miami is in, you cannot have like expensive players that only do one or two things really well, and you want those well-rounded players that make everything fit easier. We're going to have to develop our own brand of Moneyball in this series, as we're just limited in what we can do. Now, we do have available budget. This is an extremely cheap roster that only has a handful of players even making $1 million this year. So when I hit that first free agent period, I should have some spending room. But I want to be cognizant of where this team is, and I want to spend in the right areas. Because in the early days, we're going to be trying to build up a core. And if we're adding free agents after year 1 or year 2, they have to fit into a long-term vision. So can we find players in free agency that have good value projected 4 or 5 years down the road while not being too expensive to add? I don't see us being able to look at many free agents that are going to make more than $15 million a year. It just gets tough to make things fit together. So this is going to be a draft and develop series. I really wanted to highlight that. I want a series where my draft picks are making up majority of this starting lineup. I want to embrace being this young, developing team, and I'm excited to develop the offense. That is where they need the most work. I do think players like Connor Norby have the chance to be staples of this team. But the Marlins have not really been known for their offense, and I'm excited to develop it. Last year, they were ranked 28th in on-base percentage, 27th in home runs, and 27th in runs scored. This organization doesn't typically have players with too much power, so I'm excited to try and fix that a bit. And I'm just thinking about the long-term view of this series and the chance to bring in a lot of my own prospects, develop them, and then what are the challenges with keeping that team together, as we do have the lowest budget to start franchise, and that can change as you're more successful in future years. But we're going to have to be really smart with what contracts we're giving out. Thankfully, there isn't any bad money on this team's books in 2025. A lot of teams have contracts that they're just kind of waiting to end, and we're not in that position. So we have kind of a clean slate with this team. The starting rotation is not going to be anything special to begin. We have only 2 healthy pitchers in the 70s that are going to be in that big league rotation. And we're just going to be letting a lot of young players get playing time and see what happens. You know, maybe a player like Robbie Snelling gets the fast track in this position just because he's one of the best options we have. But we also want to be developing these guys in the minor leagues, and I'd like to highlight the minor league play more in this franchise. There are things that I didn't like about my last one I wanted to correct this time around. And certainly spending more time with the prospects, seeing them play, getting in some games is really important. Where this team is strong when it comes to their farm system is with their pitching. There are some top 100 prospects. The top here in the game is actually a shortstop, and maybe the shortstop of this team's future in Starlin Caba. Only 19 years old, they acquired him from the Phillies back in December. His defense is really good. He's a switch hitter. We'll see how far along the offense comes. When you have these players with those hitting ratings in the 30s, 20s, and 40s, I have seen everything across the board here the last couple years, from players just never really progressing to being major league hitters to having a really good skill set. So there's no guarantees just because a player's potential is good. But the best hope for this team lies in their starting pitching. That's where their major league team is strongest, along with the farm system. Noble Meyer, first-round pick 2023, has a very nice ceiling and is only 20 years old. I'd say his ETA is anywhere from late 2025 to 2026. The lefty, Thomas White, is ranked 39th as a prospect, and I don't see him being all that far away from the bigs. Robbie Snelling is ranked at 65, another mid-60s rated prospect. We'll have to see who develops the fastest. That's a very clustered tier, and we're going to have openings for these players to join this rotation. Maybe it happens more in Season 2, as I really don't want to see these players get rushed, have their clocks start there with the options and everything, and potentially struggle. Augustine Ramirez is another prospect I'm really excited about. You don't always have these good, well-rounded catcher prospects, and they can be elusive in the draft. So to have a player already with good power upside, decent arm behind the plate, maybe he can become a future starting catcher for us. And those are the top 5 prospects in the organization. There are not a lot of high potential players outside of them. Again, I think that these C potential players could play more of an impact with us, just where this organization is. If you can get to 75 overall, you're probably good enough to play until we raise the relative talent level of the organization. If you go to the transactions option here and then down to roster history, I love this menu because it shows you when every player joined your organization and how they were acquired and what team they came from, if it was a waiver claim or a trade. So much of this team has only been in the organization for a few years. I mean, they really did reset things following 2023. They also made a postseason appearance back in 2020, and that wasn't that long ago. Very few players were actually acquired prior to that. Edward Cabrera is one of the longest tenured players in the organization then, 10 years now as of this season. So as we get this series underway, there are a lot of plans I have for the early episodes. I do not want to spend too much time in Season 1 or likely Season 2. I really want to quickly find out who's a part of our future, draft prospects, and have a chance to really start that part of the franchise quickly. Something I came to enjoy toward the end of my Cardinals series was playing less full 9-inning games and a lot more critical situations, player lock games, and chunks of specific games. And it allowed me to see us against a lot more opponents, play a lot of late game situations, and I felt it helped the episodes get a lot more action-packed. We are still going to play some 9-inning games in this series, of course, and that's going to be the way we start next episode with opening day. But that process allows me to move through weeks and months a lot faster while feeling like I'm getting the experience I'm looking for. So I knew there were a lot of things I wanted to make better about this series compared to the Cards and even my A's franchise from 2 years ago that I thought set a pretty good bar for what I want to do with these series. Why don't I get into a spring training game and we'll just talk about things a little bit and we'll throw quick counts on. Very fitting we move on from the Cardinals and get to play them here in a little spring training game. Sandy Alcantara on the mound. And the first thing you'll notice here are the settings with which I play with in franchise. So I like to keep things on a more realistic side of things, and I prefer to have settings that highlight player ratings. So I use the classic pitching interface where I just aim and choose my pitch. I also have the most simple hitting setting with no PCI, no guess pitch. I play on classic pitching. And man, 2 pitches in, we're already giving up a run. This is an excellent start and surely a sign of things to come. Of course, there are settings I could use that make the gameplay even more ratings-based and realistic, like if I had auto-fielding, throwing, and base running on. I still want to play the game, but I do like having the core stuff really focus on those player attributes. And that's what really gets me to enjoy franchise the most. You know, I like having to struggle with a lower-rated team and eventually make them stronger, find new players, and when those ratings make a difference, that's when franchise feels the most rewarding. Got him looking! Strike 3 on Nolan Gorman, who was the superstar of my Cardinals series. And they're going to score a second run here on the Alec Burleson RBI single. I do play on Hall of Fame difficulty. That's just the difficulty I've enjoyed the most over the last few years. And I don't tend to mess with gameplay sliders much. There are sliders for injuries and things like that I do like to mess with. But as far as like the in-game balance, I'm pretty happy with the way the show plays. I love playing the game. That's Xavier Edwards hooking one into right. It's caught. Here's a look at our Marlins starting lineup. Yeah, not many high batting averages last season. Although Edwards, these are projections, so we're not expected to have many high batting averages. They don't think Edwards is going to hit over 300 again. But I'm focused on where this lineup begins and where they are at the end of the year. I want to take a good snapshot of our lineup and our overalls when we get the next episode underway, and then compare it once we wrap up the first full season. Generally, my episodes in series like this end up being 40 to 60 minutes, sometimes longer, not often shorter, but I find that I need a lot of time to really get the baseball experience I'm looking for. That's smoke through the middle. A base hit for Connor Norby. 115 off the bat. Oh, I didn't realize just how fast he was either. 87 speed. Orioles fans got to feel pretty bad about losing a prospect like him. As good as their young core is, that's a nice player that the Marlins got in that deal. Might be one of the highest upside players we have, and we're going to let him fly here around third. Into second is Jesus Sanchez, and I forgot to send him home. It's spring training, and I haven't played baseball in 3.5 months. My bad. Oh, also, I do make random base running blunders. That is something you'll have to just kind of accept. But I'm working on it. Really hard. That should score him at least. Sacrifice opportunity. And Norby tags up from third and dives in for the run. One thing that did really well for the series in my A's franchise that I just didn't do with the Cards is the occasional live stream. So, of course, with a season of 162 games, we aren't playing anywhere close to all of them. But a way to get some extra games in an efficient way is to stream. And it's a cool way to just get a closer look at the team, get some more games in. And I do plan on doing a lot more streaming in this series. Streams that will highlight prospects and get us some games in at the minor league level, along with just batches of games in the regular season that otherwise wouldn't be played. So those aren't going to be happening like constantly, but I would like to hopefully stream every year, especially when we get to the days of hopefully some exciting prospects to get a closer look at. If you're not somebody who enjoys live streams, I use my streams as ways to add on to the series. So if there are any big events that happen in the stream, then those are going to be edited into the following episodes. And this is not a good spring start for Sandy Alcantara. Might be a very short outing. Edwards, he's going to help us flip a double play. Griffin Conine gets a hold of one, and that is smashed into the right field wall. Conine has some upside as he walks in to second base. And yes, he is the son of former outfielder Jeff Conine. Oh, that sounded pretty good as well. Deep to right, and gone! A home run. Davison De Los Santos with the first unofficial home run of the franchise. There really is a little bit of everything when I do my baseball series. We're going to have some full 9-inning games, critical situations, quick manage games where I jump in, and player locks. So we're going to get a lot of different ways to experience this series. There isn't really a target number of episodes per series. However, I've been trying to speed up the pace of my franchises over the last year. I've done that in my Jaguars franchise on Madden with a lot of success. I will say that in my A's series, that first season had 8 episodes plus 2 streams, while the Cardinals had 8 episodes and no streams. I'd like for this to go faster than that. As a ballpark, maybe 4 or 5 episodes during some of these tough years, maybe with a stream. You know, it's not really about the number of episodes, but more so, I just want a good feel for the team. I want to feel like I'm, still a part of things while moving quickly. So it's trying to thread a fine needle, because I'm not going to get too much satisfaction from just hitting quick sim over multiple months at a time. I do want to see what's going on and stay up with where the team is at. Yeah, let's get Otto Lopez in here. I wanted an at-bat with him. He's another one of those players that could be a part of this team's future. And he grounds out to the right side and is retired. I get asked about my camera angle I play with a lot as well, and this is a version of Fisheye 2 that I've been customizing and then I recreate in every game of the show. This is Fisheye 2 just by default. My changes make it look more like this. So it's just, I'm altering the rotation a little bit, zooming in a little bit. And yeah, it gets to about here. And it's just the camera that I'm so used to playing on. And every year I'm like, oh, I got to recreate this camera. I'm not adjusting to anything different. I just think it looks nice to play the game this way. And then I swing at one of those. Yeah, Jojo Romero's nasty. We know that from the Cardinals series. Don't argue it. It's day one of spring training. Anthony Bender is one of the highest rated pitchers on the team, and he's going to come out of our bullpen here in the 9th inning. Had him in my last series, so a little familiarity there. But let me know down below if you have any questions about the franchise, or just let me know what you're excited about. Things you are just looking forward to seeing here in the franchise. I've been really waiting to get this one underway, it feels, since like September when I began to really think about, where that last series was and what I wanted to do differently and better. The A's franchise was a more frequently posted, consistent series. Only going to get the one here. So I kind of look at the prime baseball time on my channel being right now when the game comes out to the beginning of September when it's more football season. So that gives us a really good chunk of time to try to do the most we can in a series. In my A's franchise, I had done 62 episodes before September, which was an episode every 2.5 days. Strike 3 on Jordan Walker. Nice fastball. The Cardinals, meanwhile, only had 44 episodes in that time, one every 3.4 days. So I'm looking to make a lot of corrections from last year's game. I started my series like 2 weeks after it came out. Didn't even get the first episodes up all that quickly once the first was posted. Didn't do any streaming. Didn't post it quick enough. And it just wasn't as good as the A's series. So that is kind of what I'm chasing this year. But I want to do a better job than even the A's series of highlighting prospects and the general flow of the series, going through those early years especially, until hopefully we can turn this team into contenders. Also in the Cardinals series, I was always working on something else, whether it was the Raiders franchise or when we got to July, I was playing a lot of college football 25. I do want to make sure this game has the main focus of the channel for a while. Now, my Jaguars franchise is not yet finished, but I think we are, we're definitely in the second half of that series, and we'll see how much more of it we have. But I do want at least a couple months where this is the primary focus of the channel. I can just really lock in on this series the way I did the A's back in 2023. But before we end today's episode, I do want to finish off this spring training game, and then I'll set everything up to get the real thing underway. Oh, man, that was a good one to hit, and Kyle Stowers just lazily flies out and right. Oh, something else about those last series. So the Cardinals, I basically played 5 years before doing our long-term simulation, which doesn't feel like a lot, especially if there's a lot of developing you have to do, so I certainly want to go beyond 5. My A's franchise is the best comparison for this one, and that series went 7 seasons before the long-term sim. 2 whole seasons more, I mean, that's a lot more to develop the team and get play in with them. So I'm really hoping that we have a great series this year. I'm really excited to get it underway. And I'll have the first full games and first, regular episode coming up here within a couple days. Either tomorrow or Wednesday, more likely. Lopez, that's going to be a tough play, but safe at second. Okay. Come on, Connor Norby, the Minnesota native, walk us off here in the spring. Not like that, and I forgot I had quick counts on. Much rather have Victor Scott hitting versus on second base as he strikes out. It's like I'm saying goodbye to our old friends from the Cards series. Brendan Donovan, he was awesome. Who's going to become the stars that we love from this series that I'm still thinking about like 4 years from now? Like, remember all those great hits from Player X? Who's it going to be? My series are all about seeing the growth of these stars. Otto Lopez! No! Mervis couldn't scoop it. Great, I get to face Ryan Helsley, too. Fighting off some tough pitches here from Helsley. That was a nasty slider. 101. Blown by Jesus Sanchez. Oh, just missed this one. And that'll be out number 2. And it's all left up to Griffin Conine. Full count. Got him at 103. Really reaching back there. The first win in the series, you'll have to wait for that. And next time we get opening day underway in the 2025 season, the start of our rebuild of the Miami Marlins. Again, please subscribe to the channel, be a part of this series, and if you wouldn't mind leaving a like down below, I would really greatly appreciate it. And I'm just excited to get things underway. I'll be back again here very shortly to kick off year number 1.